Our next respondent is Professor Masalha. He's a Palestinian historian and currently an associate member of the School of African and Oriental Studies, SOAS, University of London. He's the former director of the Center for Religion and History at St. Mary's University. He's interested in memory, and this is fascinating, in memory and social activism, liberating histories, theologies of liberation, history from below, and decolonizing methodologies. He's also the historian commentator in the award-winning documentary film La Terre par les Arabes, which tells the story of the background and build-up to the expulsion of the Palestinians in 1948 and the Nakba. His books include Expulsion of the Palestinians, The Concept of Transfer in Zionist Political Thought, 1882 to 1948, and The Zionist Bible, Biblical Precedent, Colonialism, and the Erasure of Memory. Professor Masalha.
مساء الخير للجميع وألف مبروك لإيلان. ألف مبروك.
Thank you.
This is a great book. The best thing about this book, actually, Ilan actually begins the book with his own experience. And he begins it with a conference in 2014 at Exeter University, conference about settler colonialism in Palestine. 2 weeks before the conference, I met Ilan in London, and he told me that Michael Gove, a cabinet secretary, in the, I think David Cameron was actually Prime Minister, actually phoned Exeter University and tried to either cancel the conference or force the conference to incorporate a Zionist speaker, or Zionist speakers in the conference, actually. Yeah. We have the British government, from within the British government, intervening to stop an academic conference, a university which is supposed to be autonomous. We are supposed to be autonomous universities. We're not run by the British government. But that's the brilliant thing about this book is actually incorporating personal experiences, but also being a historian myself, actually, I can sympathize with Ilan quite a lot, and going to the past in order to understand the present and to learn about the future. The past is something that can teach us a lot about the present, and an awful lot of the arguments which were constructed by Ilan and by the Zionist lobby in the 1840s. For the first time, we have a Zionist lobby in London, operating from London. Right. And it's a Protestant lobby. It's not about Christianity, my friends. We have Palestinian Christians. We have Christians throughout the Middle East. It's not about Christianity because most Christians are Catholics. There was no sign of Christian Zionism among the Catholics. It was about a particular type of Christianity. And that's the brilliant thing about Ilan, is that evangelical Christianity, but also it was millennialist Christianity, end of times Christianity. Christianity which trying to expedite the coming of the Messiah by thinking that the restoration of the Jews to Palestine. By the way, the lobby was called a restorationist lobby. Right. Not a return lobby, not a Zionist lobby. The term Zionism, 1860s, a bit later, about 20, 30 years later, in 1940, we have the Zionist lobby in London led by Lord Shaftesbury, Anthony Ashley Cooper. He was the son-in-law of Lord Palmerston, who was the Foreign Secretary. And we have a great story. I don't know whether you've got it actually in the book or not, because I had the book 2 days ago. I couldn't read everything about it. We have a great story of Palmerston and Ashley Cooper meeting together in London. And both of them are sipping whiskey. And Palmerston was quite dozing off. He was not listening to what Ashley Cooper, Lord Shaw, was trying to persuade him about the return of the Jews to Palestine, expediting the Messiah, and that's a great thing. He wasn't really impressed by the theology. But suddenly, Ashley Cooper started to talk about the British Empire and how this would be very useful to the British Empire, having a Jewish homeland in Palestine. This is the story of that theology. It's theology and empire and imperialism. And this is where the Zionist lobby is so important in the 19th century, because this is the height of the British Empire, and also comes to much later development. This is a is also a lobby from above. Ashley Cooper was actually an MP, Tory MP. So the lobby starts within the British Parliament. And now we have 200 Tory MPs getting money from the Zionist lobby to go to Israel.
Yeah.
A lot of money pouring into these MPs. Not just the Labour Party, but the Tory Party has the biggest Friends of Israel lobby in the country. I think Elon didn't want to mention West Streeting. I'll come back to West Streeting, the Labour. And I'll come back to Stoma. I'll come back to Stoma. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry about I'm not that sort
Oh my
of...
God.
Well, we are electioneering. I'm not that sort of person, but I'll keep it very young. But I think it is important to go back to the history and show how Balfour became a Zionist Christian. In 1906, actually, Balfour legislated to stop Jews arriving in Britain. He was anti-Semitic himself, the guy. He didn't want the Jews. That's why we have so many Jews in America, and we have very few Jews in Britain. Most Jews in Britain are the Israelis, by the way, who arrived 20 years ago. But about 200,000 Jews. France has got more Jews. America has got millions of Jews. Latin America, Brazil, Argentina has got more Jews. The British actually was trying, Balfour himself, 1906, Prime Minister Balfour, the famous Balfour of the Balfour Declaration of 1917, actually were trying to stop Jews coming to the UK. But one thing the Zionist lobby does in the 1840s, also racializing the Jews. The Jews are a race, not faith, they claim. Until then, everybody thought the Jews were a faith, like any other faith. You know, the Jews themselves didn't want to go to, they were waiting for the Messiah to come. They didn't want to go to Palestine. Some of these fundamentalist Jews still don't want to go to Palestine. They carry out placards of liberating Palestine now. But the racialization of the Jews it's very dangerous, because if it's Jews, they can't be integrated in the UK. And that racialization of the Jews became horrific in the Second World War, when they were slaughtered in large numbers. After the Second World War, some Zionists started to talk about ethnicity, that is Jewish ethnicity, not faith, ethnicity. But that racialization of the Jews, there is no race without racism, my friends. The Zionist lobby partly was anti-Semitic. That same Balfour. Now, when we come to 1917, and Elon is absolutely right, and he describes in his book, the Zionist lobby is actually operating from within the British cabinet in 1917. We have Mark Sykes, the cabinet secretary, drafting the Balfour Declaration. We have Lloyd George, the tricky Lloyd George, the liberal prime minister, the reformist, the guy who supported the suffragettes, in fact, at the head of the Zionist lobby. We have Weizmann actually also delivering his dispatches to the Zionists of South Africa from the Admiralty. He was working from within the British Royal Mail. It's a lobby operating within government. I hear a lot of Americans who say, why the American presidents actually don't stand up to the Zionist lobby? I hear this stuff. The Zionist lobby was inside the British cabinet. And Churchill was famously also part of that Zionist lobby. And it's clearly that without the British in Palestine between 1918 and 1948, the Israeli state would not have been created. The Palestinian Nakba would have been created. The horrific consequences of Zionism, the genocide in Gaza would not have taken place. The British do bear great responsibility, great blame, actually, for the Balfour Declaration, for enabling that settler colonial project in Palestine. I mean, we live in Britain, we have British passports, some of our Palestinians, but we feel very bitter about the British and the role of the British. And without the British, before the Americans got onto the act after the Second World War, before the Zionist lobby in America became the most powerful lobby in the world, the Zionist lobby was here, very at the heart of the British establishment. It was supported also by the left, and I think Elon was absolutely right to hint at the left and the Guardian, and the Manchester Guardian, and C.P. Scott, the editor of the Guardian. The Zionist lobby was supported by the left in the old days. The Zionism was supposed to be socialist. Things have changed, by the way. The Zionist lobby in Britain, by and large, is on the right. despite the fact that Keir Starmer, but an awful lot of people think that Keir Starmer nothing to do with Labour. He's just an imposter. I mean, he's a Zionist, he's a pro-Zionist, but he's not that tradition. The British trade unions today are on the side of Palestine. So things are changing. Things have changing. And I think Elon, towards the end of his brilliant chat, actually hinted at the cracks. An awful lot of cracks are taking place. Another thing about the Zionist lobby in terms of producing argumentation is the idea of a land without people. An awful lot of the Zionist arguments were actually concocted by the Christian Zionist lobby. A land without people for a people without the internationalization of the conflict. And I think Elon is hinting at the cracks and the collapse of this international lobby, the fact that the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the UN actually talking about genocide, the mass student movement in the US and in Britain, the encampments in Britain, which is forcing a lot of these colleges to disclose investments in the Israeli arms industry. The fact that we've got 1,000 British lawyers and some British judges, they're not intimidated anymore by the Zionist lobby. They are prepared to stand up. We have a High Court British judge, Lady Hale, I think, is part of that 1,000. We have an awful lot of indications that the Zionist lobby is not in control of the discourse on Palestine at the moment. Okay, it's very powerful, it's still very powerful, it's still exercising an enormous amount of protection for apartheid Israel, for the crimes of the Israeli state in Gaza. But they're not entirely in control of the discourse, the public discourse, the discourse from below, the civil society discourse in the US and in Britain. And Britain has been leading their demonstrations. We had the biggest demonstrations in the world, actually, on the question of Palestine every 2-3 weeks. Britain, which supported that settler colonial genocidal project, is actually from below, is actually leading the struggle. It's amazing. All the trade unions, most of them are affiliated with the PSC, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Things are changing. There are the signs. These are the signs. These are the things we should be pushing in order to dismantle that Zionist lobby in Britain. And I'll stop at this point.
Thank you.